Hi everybody, this is Vera, the owner and lab tech at Veriterra Lab, a soil biology testing lab. And in this video I'm going to talk about compost quality testing. So first of all, I want to say that composts are not created equal, and some products labeled as compost can be actually harmful instead of bringing benefits for plants, soil and climate. So compost quality testing is basically defining if compost is safe to use for plants, people, and also if it has biological potential for soil regeneration. So compost can be tested in many different ways. It can be tested for undesirable things like heavy metal concentrations, pathogens levels, excessive salts, persistent herbicides, or even physical contaminations like glass and plastics. Or it can be tested for desirable things like plant-friendly microbes. So as you can imagine, there are many tests that you can do, and some of them can be pretty expensive, but you don't have to do all of them because it really depends on what you are trying to achieve with your compost, and also it depends on where this compost comes from. For example, if you want to increase low pH in your soil, you probably need to check pH of your compost, because if it's low, you're not gonna get results that you want. And I said probably because if you created biologically focused compost, maintaining the right temperature, moisture and oxygen level, then in this case the pH will be most likely in the desirable range, and you can only use biological tests and skip this pH test altogether. Another example, if you want to use your compost as inoculum to add plant beneficial microbes to your soil, then you definitely need to send a sample for biological testing. And of course, if you want to make and sell your compost, you need to look into regulations, into regular pathogen testing. You can also consider organic certification or STA certification, or you can go alternative route and start making biologically focused compost and go into regular biological testing. So those were examples of how to choose the right test depending on your goals, but it also depends on where you source your compost. If you make your own compost and you don't use manure that can have heavy metals, or you're pretty sure that your starting materials don't have any herbicides residues or any toxins, then you probably can focus on doing visual assessment of your compost and regular biological tests, and do chemistry and pathogen testing from time to time, or maybe in the beginning, just to get a sense of what kind of product you are making. So let's talk about visual and biological assessments. Biological assessment is basically telling you how good your compost is for soil regeneration, plant productivity and health, for improving soil structure and water holding capacity. I am explaining this more in depth in the video about compost application benefits. Visual assessment or physical quality can provide some insight about chemical and biological qualities. So let's talk about visual assessment. Color, smell, moisture and texture. Smell is very indicative. Any bad unpleasant odor like ammonia, vinegar, something rotting, vomit smell means that this material is full of anaerobic microbes that produce harmful for plants strong organic acids and alcohol. We want a slight pleasant smell of forest floor. It can be like slight earthy woody smell. It can be mushroom smell, and of course if you see different mushrooms growing out of your pile, it's a very good sign. The next is color. Ideally we want to see dark brown, 70% cacao chocolate color. This color indicates presence of beneficial organic compounds like humic acids and fulvic acids. You can also passively pass water through your compost and look at the color of the solution if it's dark brown. Dark brown color can also be an indicator of beneficial microbes, but it's not always the case. Black color of compost means that at some point of composting process, anaerobic decomposition occurred. From my experience, black compost are usually bacterial dominated and they lack other necessary microbes like fungi, protozoa, and nematodes. Also, black compost often contain anaerobic bacteria and they tend to be more acidic. So compost can be a little bit dark, but we don't want it to be black like coal. The next important thing is moisture. To test moisture, you simply grab a handful of compost and squeeze it. Ideally, we want to see 1 or 2 drops coming out or 50% free moisture for regular compost, or it can be 3-4 drops of water or 70-80% moisture for vermicompost. It will be perfect moisture level for microbes to thrive. If it is more than 4 or 5 drops or steady stream of water, then it means that your compost is waterlogged, oxygen dropped, and anaerobic microbes started growing. There is a possibility that it contains plant and human pathogens now, and that it's more acidic. If there is no water coming out and the material falls apart and can be blown away, that means very low moisture, below 30-20%, and it's not suitable for microbes. Such materials tend to be very hydrophobic and it's very difficult to rehydrate them and use them. Another problem if they can be unfinished, and once you add water, they heat up and they can burn your plants. If the material is sticky and holds together, that means about 40-30% moisture, and beneficial microbes can live at these conditions. But some biocompost producers say that numbers drops compared to 50% moisture, and others say that they don't see any difference between 30% moisture microbial activity and 50% moisture. Now let's talk about texture and structure. It's a good sign if you can see aggregates and kind of crumbly texture. That means that fungi together with other microbes created those beautiful aggregates. And this compost will be very beneficial for improving soil structure and water holding capacity. But it also depends on moisture level. If moisture is about 70-80%, you won't be able to see aggregates because the texture will be smooth. But this compost can still contain very good amount of fungi. Another thing related to texture is presence of undecomposed materials. Compost definitely shouldn't contain any green plants or recognizable clumps of manure, but it can contain some undecomposed wood chips. In good compost, those wood chips will be also covered with beneficial microbes, and overall compost doesn't have to have a fine texture. It can be chunky. You can also always sift it if you need, or you can make extract from this material. So overall it is better to have chunky compost full of active living microbes than fine but dead material. So that's it about physical qualities. Observing them can give us clues about biology, but it's not straightforward and it can be tricky. For example, I had a vermicompost that I abandoned for months, and when I checked it, it had still really good moisture level and very beautiful brown color, but under the microscope it was almost empty. No microbes, and even bacteria wasn't very abundant. That's why we need a microscope assessment. So let's talk about it. So the biological test through direct microscopy can tell us how good the compost is for soil and plant health. To test your compost, you need to take a few samples from different areas of your pile or windrow, and then we will take 1 gram of this mix it with water, and then take a drop of this solution, spread it on the slide and put it under the microscope. Here is the camera, and you can see on the screen what now is going on under the microscope. By scanning the slide in different ways, we can measure fungi, count beneficial protozoa, nematodes, and then we can dilute further and count bacteria. By this method, we can also measure levels of potentially detrimental organisms like oomycetes, disease-causing fungi and root-feeding nematodes. Large amount of yeasts in compost can also be harmful for plants. By direct microscopy, we cannot distinguish Salmonella or E. coli from other harmless rod-shaped bacteria, but we can spot other organisms that indicate presence of pathogens or that are pathogens themselves, like Spirilla, Spirochete, or Vibrio. We can also spot anaerobic or low oxygen conditions in the compost. I usually look at more than one drop when I'm performing the assessment, and in addition to this method, I also use nematode extraction. It's a way to assess, to more accurately assess the numbers of nematodes per gram, and also to see the diversity, the different types of nematodes present. So after the actual assessment, we calculate the amounts of bacteria, fungi, protozoa, nematodes, and disease-causing microbes per gram of compost, and compare them with the minimum requirements for biocomplete compost defined by Elaine Ingham. She's been working with compost and regenerating soils for 40 plus years, and she found that compost should have at least these minimum numbers of microbes to produce an effect on plant yields and soil health, and eliminate the need for fertilizers and pesticides. So after you receive the results, you can decide how you can use this compost, or maybe you should improve your composting technique. So that was all that I wanted to share in this video. Have a good day and happy composting!